the same old tin spoon. They shouldered their muskets and looked straight ahead of them, splendid in their uniforms, all red and blue. The first thing in the world they heard was "Tin soldiers!" A small boy shouted and clapped his hands as the lid was lifted off their box on his birthday. He immediately set them up on the table. All the soldiers looked exactly alike, except one. He looked a little different, as he had been cast last of all. The tin was short, so he only had one leg. But there he stood, as steady on one leg as any of the other soldiers on there too. But just you see, he'll be the remarkable one. On the table with the tin soldiers were many other playthings, and one that no eye could miss was a marvelous castle of cardboard. It had little windows through which you could look right inside, and in front of the castle were miniature trees around a little mirror supposed to represent a lake. The wax swans that swam on its surface were reflected in the mirror. All this was very pretty, but the prettiest of all was the little lady who stood in the open doorway of the castle. Though she was a paper doll, she wore a dress of the fluffiest gauze. A tiny blue ribbon went over her shoulders for a scarf, and in the middle of it shone a spangle that was as big as her face. The little lady held out both arms, as a ballet dancer does, and one leg was lifted so high behind her, the tin soldier couldn't see it at all. And he supposed she must only have one leg, as he did. That would be a wife for me, he thought, but maybe she's too grand. She lives in a castle. I have only a box. 24 roommates to share it. That's no place for her, but I must try to make her acquaintance. Still as stiff as when he stood at attention, he lay down on the table behind the snuffle box, where he could admire the dainty little dancer who kept standing on one leg without ever losing her balance. When the evening came, the other tin soldiers were put away in their boxes, and the people of the house went to bed. Now the toys began to play amongst themselves as visits and battles, and at giving balls. The tin soldiers rattled about in their boxes, for they wanted to play too. But they could not get the lid open. The nutcracker turned somersaults, and the slate pencil squeaked out jokes on the slate. The toys made such a noise that they woke up the canary bird, who made them a speech, all in verse. The only two who stayed still were the tin soldier and the little dancer. Without ever severing from the tip of the one toe, she held her arms to him, and the tin soldier was just as steadfast on his one leg. Not once did he take his eyes off her. Then the clock struck 12, and clock popped up on the lid of the snuff box, but there was no snuff in it. No, out bounced a little black bogey, Jack in the box. Tin soldier, he said, will you please keep your eyes to yourself? The tin soldier pretended not to hear. Just you wait till tomorrow comes, the bogey said. But when the morning came and the children got up, the soldier was set on the window ledge, and whether the bogey did it, or there was a gust of wind, all of a sudden the window flew open and the soldier pitched out, headlong from the third window. He fell at breathtaking speed and landed cap first, with his bayonet buried between the paved stones, and his one leg stuck straight in the air. The housemaid and the little boy ran down to look for him, and though they nearly stepped on the tin soldier, they walked right past him without seeing him. If the soldier had called, "Here I am," they would have surely found him. But he thought it contemptible to raise an uproar while he was wearing his uniform. Soon as it began to rain, the drops fell faster and faster, until they came down by the bucketful. As soon as the rain let up, along came two rapscallions. "Hi, look," one of them said, "there's a tin soldier. Let's send him sailing." They made a boat out of newspaper and put the tin soldier in the middle of it, and away he went down the gutter with the two young rapscallions running beside him and clapping their hands. "High heavens, how the wave waves splashed and how fast the water ran down the gutter. Don't forget that it had just been raining by the bucketful. The paper boat pitched and tossed, and sometimes it whirled about so rapidly it made the soldier's head spin. But he stood steady as ever, never once flinching. He kept his eyes front and carried his gun shoulder high. Suddenly, the boat rushed under a long plank where the gutter was boarded over. It was as dark as the soldier's own box. Where can I be going? The soldier wondered. This must be that black bogey's revenge. Ah, if only I'd had the little lady with me. It could be twice as dark for all that I would care. Out popped a great water rat who lived under the gutter plank. Have you a passport? Said the rat. Hand it over. The soldier kept quiet and held his musket tighter on the rushed boat, and the rat came right after it, gnashing his teeth as he called to the sticks and straws. Halt him! Stop him! He didn't pay his toll. He hasn't shown his passport. But the current ran stronger and stronger. The soldier could see daylight ahead, where the port ended, but he had also heard a roar that would frighten the bravest of us. Hold on, right at the end of the gutter plank. The water poured into the great canal. It was as dangerous to him as a waterfall would be to us. He was so near it he could not possibly stop. The boat plunged into the whirlpool. The poor tin soldier stood as staunch as he could, and no one around. It filled to the top and was bound to sink. The water was up to his neck, and still the boat went down deeper, 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 and the paper got soft and limp. Then the water rushed over his head. He thought of the pretty dancer whom he'd never see again, and his ears rang in an old song. Farewell, farewell, O warrior brave. Nobody can from death thee save. And now the paper boat broke beneath him, and the soldier sank right through. And just at that moment, as he's swallowed by a most enormous fish. How dark it was inside that fish. It was darker than the gutter plank, and it was so cramped, but the tin soldier was staunch. He lay there, full length, soldier fashion, with musket to shoulder. Then the fish flopped and floundered in the most unaccountable way. Finally, it was perfectly still, and after a while something struck through him like a flash of lightning. The tin soldier saw daylight again, and he heard a voice say, "The tin soldier." The fish had been caught, carried to the market, bought, and brought to a kitchen where the cook cut him open with her big knife. She picked up the soldier boldly between her two fingers and carried him off upstairs. Everyone wanted to see this remarkable traveler who had traveled about in a fish's stomach, but the tin soldier took no pride in it. They put him on the table, and lo and behold, what a curious thing can happen in this world. But there he was, back in the same room as before. He saw the same children, the same toys were on the table, and there was the same fine castle with the pretty little dancer. She balanced on one leg, with the other raised high. She too was steadfast. That touched the soldier so deeply he would have cried in tears. Only soldiers never cry. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and never a word was said. Just as things were going so nicely for them, one of the little boys snatched up the soldier and threw him onto the stove. He did it for no reason at all. That black bogey in the snuff box must have put him up to it. The tin soldier stood there, dressed in flames. He felt a terrible heat, but whether it came from the flames or from his love, he didn't know. He'd lost his splendid colors. Maybe from his hard journey, maybe from grief, nobody can say. He looked at the little lady, and she looked at him, and he felt himself melting, but he stood still, steadfast, with his musket held trim on his shoulder. Then the door blew open. A puff of wind struck the dancer, and she flew like a sliff, straight into the fire with the soldier, blazed up in a flash, and was gone. The tin soldier melted, all in a lump. The next day, when a servant took up the ashes, he found him in the shape of a little tin heart. But of the pretty dancer nothing was left except her spangle, and it was burned as black